Welcome to Movie Shortens. Follow us today to a 2017 American heist comedy film called Going in Style. Before we start, be aware, there are spoilers. As the movie begins, we are introduced to Joe, a senior citizen who has an appointment at Williamsburg Savings Bank with Chuck, the bank manager. According to Chuck, Joe is in default and has to mortgage his house soon. As Joe shares his house with his daughter and granddaughter, he cannot accept it. All of a sudden, some bandits storm to the bank and start to rob it. In a very calm manner, the robbers tell everyone in the bank to lay down and keep quiet. Now, Chuck makes some noises, which draws the attention of the gang's leader. He enters the room where Chuck and Joe are and eases Joe down. He sympathizes with Joe after learning about Joe's current financial issues, which were brought up by the bank. Joe notices the leader of the gang having a Mongol warrior tattoo on his neck. A few seconds later, the robbers quickly run away with bags of cash. In the following scene, we can see Joe is summoned to the police station. He reveals to the FBI agent, Hamer, about the tattoo he saw on the robber's neck. Joe then suggests Hamer trace the bank robber by the tattoo and tell him to tune in a crime TV show called Law & Order. However, Hamer explains to him that solving a crime is taking much longer than a 1-hour TV show. Later on, Joe is accompanied home by his family. As Joe tells his granddaughter about the bank robbery, she is intrigued and thinks that it is so cool being in the middle of a heist. However, her mother soon interrupts as she thinks there is nothing cool about it. The next day, he gathers with his two lifelong friends, Albert and Willie, who soon learn about the bank robbery as well via a newspaper. Albert supposes that nobody gets hurt except the insurance company after the bank robbery, and they will never find the gang. In an intrigued tone, Joe describes the scene to his friends, saying that the robbers' actions were very quick and skillful. Later on, Willie shows Joe an envelope of pension debt that all three of them received from their company, Wexler Steel. In the next scene, the trio shows up in a meeting with other senior workers from the company. The manager reports that the company has to move all to Vietnam since the cost of operation is rising. Joe shows the pension debt to the boss and questions what will happen with this pension. However, the manager tells them that the company has frozen and their pensions are dissolved. After learning such news, Joe and the other workers express their anger and disappointments towards the company. After that, the trio gather in a cafeteria where they frequently meet. Indeed, without the pension, it has made their life much more challenging. They don't even have enough money for a proper meal. In the meantime, Joe is inspired by the bank robbery and keeps telling his friends about it. In the evening, after enjoying a meal at Albert and Willie's place, Joe reaches home and receives a notice of default from the bank. Joe is hit hard as he finds out that he will be homeless in 30 days, along with his daughter and granddaughter. The following scene shows Willie is having a health check in the hospital. As Willie's kidney failure is getting worse, the doctor advises him to ask for a kidney donor from his family members. More importantly, he needs to do a kidney transplant as soon as possible before he could die from it. In a while, Willie gets home and has a video call with his daughter and granddaughter, who he wishes to see more frequently. As a gravely ill man, Willie is even more frustrated because he cannot afford to visit his family more often. The following scene shows Albert working as a saxophone teacher for a young boy. The boy's grandmother, Annie, and Albert are clearly hitting on each other. Later on, Joe's granddaughter shows him an A-scored exam. She asks him to give her a puppy, as he promised her if she gets A's in every subject at school. The next day, the trio gathers again for Willie's birthday, along with other senior folks in their lodge. Albert gives Willie a wristwatch with a picture of his granddaughter on it as a birthday gift. Joe asks Willie and Albert to join in a bank robbery plan. While both of them are stunned, Joe states that the bank is taking his house. It practically destroys the country and crushes people's dreams. Joe empathizes. He decides to do something about it and adds that in the worst scenario, they will be sent to jail, where they even have a better life. That night, after thinking twice, Willie rings Joe and agrees to join the bank robbery plan, stating that he wants to afford to see his family more than once a year. When Joe asks Albert to join, Albert dismisses it. The next day, Albert drives Joe and Willie to the supermarket to shop for the Chicken Blue. As Albert is waiting outside, Joe and Willie get to the supermarket and start shoplifting. Worrying for his friends, Albert follows them and runs into Annie, who works there. Moments later, Joe and Willie manage to steal some items and sneak out while a security officer finds out and chases after them. At this point, Joe steals a basket of an old woman and drives away with Willie, while Albert is caught by another security guy. As Joe and Willie are on the road, they nearly hit a bus and are apprehended as well. After being released from the grocery store, Albert is ashamed of his friends and drives away, leaving Joe and Willie behind. To prepare for a better plan, Joe decides to look for Murphy, Joe's ex-son-in-law. Joe asks Murphy to find him a criminal who he can give him advice for the bank heist. Back to Albert, he again goes to the grocery store where he meets Annie. Soon after, both end up having a little fun at Annie's house. Later, we can see Albert arrives at the cafeteria and reconciles with his friends. Taking a look at a piece of news in the newspaper, the trio learns that their steel company will use their retirement money to pay utility bills. Even worse, Williamsburg Savings Bank will manage the corporate debt, which means the bank will take their pension money. Albert has had enough and immediately agrees to join his friends to rob the bank. They decide to take back what is rightfully theirs. Eventually, they get into contact with the criminal, Jesus, and soon come to talk to him. On behalf of the trio, Joe convinces Jesus to help them with the plan. In return, Joe will give him 25% of the amount he robs from the bank. Jesus agrees to join them. As Joe only has 20 days before being kicked out of his house, Jesus tries to teach a trio every lesson they need to rob a bank. First, they start with outlining the plan. Then, pick the getaway vehicle they will use, preparing a good physical shape. And the most crucial thing is to prepare a solid alibi, which they use at their lodge's carnival as a cover. 20 days have passed, and it's D-Day. In the afternoon, at 2:14 p.m., the trio are in the carnival, and soon they decide to take action. At 2:30 p.m., Willie drives a bus and takes the trio to the bank. The robbery happens just like what they had planned before. While Albert sets the timer and uses a gun to control everyone in the bank, Joe and Willie go to the clerks and take all the money. Things go smoothly until a young girl offers Willie a doll. At this point, Willie comes to the girl and eases her down. In a few seconds, a clerk grabs the opportunity and calls the police. When Willie sits down and checks on the little girl, he abruptly collapses. In a while, as he manages to get over it, the little girl partially takes off his mask. She also notices the watch Willie wears with the picture of his granddaughter on it. Seconds later, as Joe and Albert help Willie up, Chuck grabs the gun and threatens them to leave the money back. However, he misses while attempting to shoot at the trio. Joe pulls his gun out and shoots non-stop towards Chuck's direction, leaving Chuck terrified and yelling hysterically. Eventually, the trio gets on the truck and runs off from the scene with $2.3 million. That night, they celebrate at a fine dining restaurant where Albert plays saxophone. The party ends shortly and the trio come home. On the way, Willie passes out due to his kidney failure. The next day, Hamer, the FBI agent, has already found out about Willie's figure on the camera and suspects that he must be around his 60s. In the meantime, Albert and Joe bring Willie to the hospital and eventually find out about Willie's health problem. Now, Willie needs a kidney transplant as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Hamer shows up at the grocery store where the manager shows him Albert's walk from the video surveillance cameras. He notices that the figures in both of the footage are very similar to each other. The next day, Albert sees some cops show up at his front door. Soon after, the cops also find Willie and Joe. They are arrested on suspicion by the FBI shortly thereafter. As Hamer starts to interrogate them, the trio stick to their alibi like they had planned before. We have a little flashback to yesterday. It turned out that Joe went to the ticket room and swapped his hat with his fellows, then sneaked out successfully. As for Willie, he went to the haunted house, changed his costume, and got away. Albert went to the public toilet. he sneaked out and quickly got on the bus. After finishing off, the trio stopped by Jesus's for money laundering. To find the suspects, Hamer takes the trio along with other senior suspects into a police lineup, using the child witness to identify Willie. After she walks and looks carefully at each of them for a while, she realizes the watch on Willie's hand, but refuses to identify him, leaving Hamer with no answer. Cut to a few days later, Joe and Jesus show up at the cafeteria as Jesus hands Joe a cage with a puppy inside. To Joe's surprise, it is revealed that Jesus is the leader of the robbers from the robbery Joe witnessed. He gives Joe $2.3 million and refuses to take the money from Joe. Jesus also reveals to Joe that the tattoo he saw the other day is just a temporary tattoo to trick the police. All of a sudden, Hamer also shows up at the cafeteria and returns Joe the wallet he forgot. After some small talk, Hamer sits down and plays with the puppy in the cage, where Jesus hides the money. Their conversation is cut short as the puppy bites Hamer's finger. Now, Joe calmly takes the cage and leaves along with Jesus and Hamer. Later on, the trio sends a suitcase full of cash to help their friends, co-workers, and fellows at the lodge. Days later, Willie has his kidney donated from Albert. In the end of the movie, Albert and Annie get married, and the trio celebrate their fortune. Like and subscribe to watch more videos like this, and don't forget to turn on your notifications. That really helps my channel. Thanks for watching.